Well, hi everyone, and welcome back to the Drawing Database. Professor Marc here, and what we've got now is a long-term pose, a little long figure study, full value or relatively full value. And working with, there you saw color pencil, polychromos pencils. I'll do the primary gesture and some of the basic block in with the red, and then I'll come back kind of like I like to do and work with the black. So you can see I'm starting with full page gesture here. We've got our brand new NKU models. Thank you, a shout out to those wonderful students. Oksana here, and then we also have Stephen, and then Brevin, who's not a student, but with the certainly within the Cincinnati community. So shout out to all those three wonderful young people. And we'll get started here with the really wonderful, lovely Oksana, great kid here, and working now with the gesture. So we've got the pose. You can see I've got the axis lines, working the design lines through to the buttock and the head, and this should be sensual kind of a material for you if you're probably this far along. Getting that nice arch here. Head slightly tilted, looking back and up, and lit now from the left. So working the gesture through here, just getting a feel for the head and placement, the center line and the eye line, generally shoulder appendages coming down, and getting composition laid in, going for and using full sheet, full page. Probably one of the hardest things to get across to earlier beginning students is gesture does so much for you in terms of drawing practice, in terms of scale, proportion, in this case, all of that, composition, location of appendages, and essentially getting the spirit of the pose here. So working through the shoulder tilt there. You notice how the right shoulder is much higher than the left shoulder in the image, and it's certainly a long, deep dive down from the high left to lower right, and then locating the head here. I'm going to enlarge. You're going to notice me enlarge the head a little bit for effect, and also slightly the feet to ground her a little bit. The camera can do a little parallax from time to time and play a little bit with proportional differences. Not a whole lot. Sometimes a lot if you get a lot of aggressive foreshortening. Here, these were mainly tripod shots, or they were handheld. My colleague and I, Kevin Minty, took these shots with our wonderful student models as well. So coming down and getting the abdomen rib cage located through the unitard there. Or leotard. My wife corrected me. It's actually unitard, since it exposes more of the buttock and the back a little bit further. So it's a unitard there. And Oksana did a nice job of choosing a tone that matched her skin tone, her flesh tone, pretty naturally, I think, there. So she did a wonderful job with that. And so, of course, we did that because these are still students within our program. So we would not want them to pose nude for us, so that would be a conflict of interest. They're kind of like my, I don't have children, so they're kind of like my my art babies, if you will. So that would be a conflict. We certainly wouldn't want to do that. You'll see Brevin later on in some videos, and she is full nude, which she agreed to do. And they were also, by the way, they were all paid, our models, or we paid our models. But Brevin will be full nude. She's not a student of ours. She's an artist in her own right, and also part of the modeling community within the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky region. So we could go ahead and shoot her if she agreed to full nude as well. So now just working the gesture through here, and getting to a point where getting happy with some of the proportional areas that are working using horizontal vertical alignment for aligning, positioning the breast, finding the center of the sternum and chest cavity through there, and then locating the breast through the unitard covering. as well. So those of you, if you're instructors, or if you like to draw, or you're thinking about maybe modeling yourself, and in any kind of body proportion will do. I think models of all shapes and sizes and ethnicities are celebrated and welcome. You can advertise yourself if you're not comfortable with full nudity. Certainly a classy kind of leotard or unitard, or some kind of covering will do just as nicely. There's sometimes we don't really need the genitals. Mostly the breast would be probably better mostly, but that, in this case we cannot. But I think that there's something to be said for clothed models too as well for modeling. So I think that's important if you're concerned about that at all. I'd never really get that worked up over it as well. And sometimes it just works out actually a little bit better. There's no real, I don't think, a whole lot of value in discussing the private areas of drawing. They're pretty essential basic shapes, and then forms I think are fine. So now getting the gesture of the figure, but now locating a little bit of the drapery. I'm not going to go into a long drapery study. This will be a long video as it is, since it's a long pose. But you'll see I'll drive the focal point by a number of reasons, by making the head a little bit bigger to emphasize that. I'll change the proportions a little bit, and also grounding her with the feet a little bit larger, which I like to do. Sometimes naturally and sometimes more cognizantly when I'm doing or consciously. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the drapery and the platform just to give her a location within the drawing itself. So I'll put a timestamp on this. We're in December of 2020, so we're in the hopefully on the back end slightly of the COVID pandemic, and we've got the vaccine starting to come out hopefully through most of the world, and starting to emerge with the vaccine to our healthcare workers, essential workers, and politicians. If you may or may not think they're important, but that is what's going on now. So we're kind of in 2020 here. And I'm just getting a feel for the full calf here. You'll see me correct it. I'll make it. I tend to make the calves and the soleus. I'll tend to really bulk those up no matter who's posing. And she has pretty athletic, has an athletic physique. So the soleus right underneath the calf, and then down below, halfway down below the calf that moves down to the Achilles is in slight flex here. And so it gets a little bit bulkier, but I'll take some of that out, let's slim that out as well. So we're always, you're always kind of in a state of constant analysis of your drawing and changes as you need to, obviously, to make them, which is really important. So you can see we're about 7 or 8 minutes through working on the volume of the model, the volumetric part of the figure, or a shorthanded version of that. And what I mean by that is to essentially get to a point where you don't have to draw the volumetric figure, the boxes and all that, but it's in your mind and it's in your thinking, and it comes out quite strongly for sure. I think that's kind of understood and certainly very, very important, no doubt. So we're working through here. Working that back right leg. It makes it a little bit of an introduction. It comes through the knee. It's really hard to see right on the patella that we do see slightly behind that. We'll get to that later on. And feeling the back calf somewhat as it makes its way down. She's got her foot on toe there, pointed up. The heel up a little bit. And its foot slightly, just barely. It's about level too, but maybe just slightly behind where the other foot is there. So using horizontal and vertical alignment to guide me through. If you're not sure what that is, you want to go back and catch those videos. Take a look at that. where you can. And that helps, she's got, the buttock is a little further out, just barely, than the heel. I've probably got it extended a little bit further. I think I'll bring it back in as we go deeper into the pose, but just getting the general feel of the basic forms here. Anatomy. The foot as it's flexed there, resting on the ball of the foot. And the toe just drawing away here. Keeping this simple. And kind of getting everything in order. Get a feel for the platform behind. I won't spend a lot of detail or time on that later on, but just getting a sense of where it's located. You always generally try to teach my students here at the university at NKU, and then obviously here out in YouTube land, is to give your figures some kind of environment as you draw them, and or especially give the figure a focal point, which is generally up around the head. And so we get a hierarchy of where we're going to read the model from first read on to second, third, and all the way down the figure. Generally the focal point is going to be up at the head or around the head, and so making an issue in case of that is going to be important. So working with the shoulder, feeling the gesture there, feeling the bicep and the tricep area, getting to the elbow region there. Feeling that come down. You can see the gesture already done for me, and so I can feel the volumes here. I kind of reposition the gesture, find the wrist. And kind of work that tube down. It's a big, large tube with the forearm muscles, the flexors and extensors, kind of an egg form in there as they're torquing. Here they're not so much, but overall in general they will be. So we find that to be the case, working our way down to the hand. To flow to the hands. So I'm working today in colored pencil, and I have to say that I don't do a lot of long studies in colored pencil. I mostly use chalk or charcoal or chalk, and the reason why it's much softer and more easy to manipulate. I do a few in colored pencil because we use colored pencil in my drawing courses here at NKU, mostly to introduce the student to gesture and volume and some value, and then we put it down to work in charcoal. It's just an easier material, the charcoal that is, and the Carbothello pencils to render form. It is a little harder to control, but I find that just for video drawing and then the kind of position I have to be in to make the camera work, boy, it makes drawing harder with the color pencils. They're just harder and they don't blend as well. And it's a real kind of longer term struggle. I just don't think I do as good a job with colored pencils. You might, and I think a lot of students are going to like that. They certainly like starting out that way until charcoal becomes more manageable. And I would actually suggest, if you're new to figure drawing, that you do put your charcoal pencils and sticks away and then work with colored pencil to get a feel for the magnitude of the difficulty. And as you start to maneuver and get more comfortable, and as you start rendering full values, start working in more softer materials, you'll see me do that as well. I think the color pencil is probably the hardest material to work with in terms of just getting, in terms of time. I think it takes twice as long, and you have to push down a lot harder to get the pigment to kind of rub off there. So now working the scale and proportion, going back and working through the unitard top here. I'm going to leave the straps off. I think it's a better pose without the straps. It's a little bit more elegant when we take those off. So the straps will just stay out of the drawing. And so just getting a feel for the anatomy, finding the shadow shapes there. Nothing too relatively definitive right now in terms of working through, I would call this, again, a more extended gesture, certainly. And now we're getting into more volume and detailing, working the bicep over. Fairly athletic structure going on. And feeling the shadow and the rib cage pulling through. Sometimes I'll just throw a little tone down there where that shadow shape is to kind of gather them all together, which helps me start to see it. You can see me kind of move the pencil around, think, look, I'm working scale and proportion. Getting located, getting all the parts located. There's so much complexity that goes on with the pose. Even one like this one for sure. If you look at the shoulder angle, see how the breast angle, if you take a look at the bottom of the breast forms, they'll be the same angle. Generally, they'll follow the shoulder, no matter what kind of tilt. So wherever the shoulders go, the breast forms will go as well. Almost always. Find that center again through here into the chest. Locate the breast region. So the breast form to the left is lower to the one in right because it's at an angle, follows the shoulder as it's tilted. And we're hitting now on the outside of the rib cage there. Not the middle, but the outside there. And there's the center, the abdominal split there, the rectus abdominis area. And then locating relatively almost the bottom of the rib cage there, kind of where that split from the almost into the rib cage, slightly into the oblique, where you get down to the last sort of couple of little folds on the unitard there, where that is. You'll see me work around the areas, fill in the shadow shape a little bit here, all kind of sort of gesture and volume, sort of all kind of connected together. Hitting the edge of the unitard there, where the pelvic crest, the iliac crest was, and coming down to the middle section where it goes behind the leg there, right before the thumb. I leave myself a little short between the outer breast and the bottom of the leg where her hand's going to rest, just barely. And so I just place her on the left side of the image, the thumb, I hide it a little bit behind the right leg. You'll make changes all the time. I think I talk about that in other videos, but you make little changes all the time. I think when we work from images more so, you're a little bit given less latitude because you have a standing image. But I like the changes and I welcome them as long as they're not too dramatic if you're trying to be fairly accurate. When you have a live model, that live model is going to move often and will slump if it's a longer pose. And then of course you have to, if you're going for quite a long pose, you'll have to get the model back into the position, and that's problematic to get it exact. So you're always dealing with a little bit of movement. So you really want to give yourself a little break in that sense where you have a long pose and maybe things are slightly off. You don't want to keep correcting because next time it might change a little bit. You you get stabilized what you have, and then you work with that. Here we are coming back. Had to take a little bit of a break there. You'll see me do that from time to time, taking little breaks when I need. So working with the upper shoulder there, the deltoid region coming down, putting on now a little feeling the neck a little bit and the chin where that's located. And then the jaw, mandible area working outward. So she's just slightly tilted to the right, and then of course we'll have her looking up in different poses. She was excellent model, and easy to work with, and really poseable. So you get a feel for that for modeling if you've ever modeled, and taking direction, and then there's a time when you've done it for so long you probably don't need as much as well. So laying in the hair there, getting the hair settled in, just the feeling of it, the gesture of it, and the neck it's elongated and curling and coming down to the sternum. Remember, the neck is located at the back base of the head. The mastoid process is really behind the ears, and then over downward it slinks down on both sides to the sternum. You can see that pretty strongly with her anatomy here. Chin, reducing the shoulder size a little bit. Notice how I don't erase, I don't change a lot, don't correct a lot, because there's no really need to, because you're drawing lightly enough to make those kinds of changes and corrections. Coming back and then delineating the chin a little bit further. Now going for the head. Just feeling my way through the head. There'll be a lot of complexity that goes on with the head. You'll see me spend later on about an hour rendering out the full head. You've got a little bit big, and I liked it, and I left it just a little bit larger so it commands a little bit more of the space, so we get her pose and her features in and make that work. It, if we got it a little bit too big, it would be too big. It would be problematic. But I think I'm okay. And then we've seen several artists emphasize heads either a little bit bigger and sometimes smaller with Pontormo, and also El Greco. But I keep mine just a little bit bigger in this particular pose. Getting the symbol of the nose. Now she's upturned. So it's kind of a triangle, as we see both the nostrils more oval. Getting her eyebrows in, they're slightly tilted higher left, lower right there. And just getting a feel where the eyes will go. I don't want to, you got to be careful at the size of the head here when you're drawing, as you just don't have a lot of space for a lot of detail, unless you're trying to be hyper photorealism, which we're not doing here. We're drawing, we're sketching. It's about a 6-hour study, which really isn't that long. Most of the time I try to get done with my classes, a full sketching class, I give them about 3 hours, and so we abbreviate enough to keep it even looser than what I'm doing now. And oftentimes they're actually better than when they're a little bit looser here. So I try to keep mine as loose as I can, but get a little bit tighter. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just using the side of the tool to get a mass block in at a small scale. So you notice I won't go for a lot of clarity and detail. I'm not drawing eyeballs and the pupil and the iris. I don't want anything to be super delineated with line, because I want to make changes and look and see. So I'm using the side of that pencil to just render value and tone. And she's about half lit, half shadow, and the shadow really starts to emerge on her from about the middle of the forehead down. You can see a little bit of shadow on the nose, and then down to the mouth, etc., and so on. So getting a very curved downward mouth approach, kind of like two triangles that are put together kind of at the center there where there's kind of a straight line where the kind of the corners of the nodes of the mouth are. And so you get this inverted kind of triangle. And then you'll see me later on tighten this head up further and further. It's going to be a little bit blurry just because of where the camera's at. I'm at my home studio now, which is a little tougher setup, than the one I used to have at school. So because we're COVID. And so I'm struggling a little bit. I'm actually standing and leaning way over. I need to have a tilted camera, some kind of tripod in the future. That'll be my next step. But so you can see where I've got just the basic formal structure of the head. It looks fairly, in the ballpark of what we want with her features, where that look is. And so I think that's okay. And I'll tighten that up as we go through, and I'll make some things and adjustments smaller and where I need. But she's in pretty good shape there, and with the head just a little bit larger. That was certainly my aim in the beginning. And she's close there. Going for the cheekbone. And feeling that way through, and then let's see what I do here. Kind of narrating the drawing out, of course, after I've done it, and I'm anticipating certain moves I may or may not do. Getting the tip of the nose and triangle of the nose again. So I think it's right in here at this level of drawing where students, if you're earlier in drawing or less experienced, you can start to get into trouble, and you want to detail all this out. You really have to think in less line, in more value and more broad toning, and then you get deeper and deeper into these changes that you work through. And I think that's why it's easier just to render these in charcoal, probably additive subtractive charcoal, since you can erase back, which is probably my favorite way to draw more academic figure models in chalk and also charcoal. But I do like to, again, start out with color pencil, because I think a lot of students, it's just, I find that you don't have to worry about the smudging in the beginning. When I was an undergrad student in Los Angeles at Art Center College of Design, I remember starting with Harold Carmi, and it was charcoal, and it was really frustrating. And I was pretty advanced for what I knew, at least what I thought I knew. And charcoal, it really flummoxed me for a while, kind of put me off of it a little bit, But yeah, so now point being, whatever it makes it easier for you in the beginning, go for it. So what we've got now is a beginning gestural, slight volumetric lay-in, you can tell now, of the figure. And so what we can do is begin to just kind of make some minor changes, tilt her a little bit further. And you can tell that she's just kind of getting the width there of what we want. Adam's apple there, the digastric grouping underneath the thorax, and then coming over and getting a little bit right underneath the clavicles. The clavicle turns under with that little shadow. It's very soft. A lot of folks make that too hard edge. You can't. It's a very soft transition. Now her deltoid and the pectoral come over the clavicle, where I've got it kind of where her unitard strap is, and then underneath there we've got a little bit of the underarm, and so now I'm going to come over the deltoid or the shoulder and just feel my way through and find that shadow shape with that line, and then start blocking. And now you can see I'm running in the shadow tone of the model's arm, with Oksana's arm again now out into the background together. So I'm integrating the shadow tone and the background tone. I see a lot of folks try to separate those. There's no reason to. Get them blocked in together to make this faster and more efficient. And sometimes you're going to see the camera blur a little bit. It's hard to read my head and what I'm drawing to, so I certainly apologize for that for the camera. Since it's cold, I wear a beanie skull cap, keep my head warm. Nobody wants to see my big old bald spot, so that's why I keep that. My best friends call me Professor Bald Spot, so it's a loving moniker for me. Wonderful to have to live that down. My brother still has a full head of hair. I'm jealous of him. I don't know how that happened, but he still does. He's about 4.5 years younger than me. Oh well. So I'm just kind of tweaking The upward turn of her mouth, just to get that a little more accurate. Notice how I didn't use any line. It's all tone. And I'm spending an inordinate amount of time and gesture with this facial feature, because it's important to get that, close to accurate. I'll tilt her over again further. You'll see me raise her up a little bit. Higher in the eyes. I think that's going to help later on with the pose. And so you make those adjustments as you go through. Now using the side of the tool to block in some of the background tone, this more general. You'll see me, integrate the background to the foreground, but I certainly won't do a full background study. If you were in a French atelier, French studio in the 19th century, 18th century even, Russian studios, you'd spend, hours, a month on a pose, larger pose, really render that deeply, but we're not, 5 or 6 hours, you can get a lot out of that. But there's nothing wrong with going further if you want, all in preparation for other work as well. Giving a little expression now to the other deltoid. Look at the tilt, that we've got a good tilt going. Get that other deltoid. Fancy name for shoulder. I'll get a little bit of this curvature of the folding back there that my colleague arranged wonderfully. So we worked as a team to get our models shot, photographed. We had a female monitor for them, so they felt comfortable in the studio classroom while we're shooting them, semi-clothed. And so we had a female professor there, just for their comfort too, as well. Certainly for our model that was nude as well. So remember, we had some videos of longer poses. Remember, if I had to redact the photograph, the image. Croquis Cafe again changed their copyright procedure, which they certainly have the right to do, and we decided that we would honor that. We had to honor that anyway, but we felt like that instead of paying a fee, we would go ahead and gave us the opportunity to hire and shoot our own models. So I wrote a grant for money, and we were able to pay our models, and we will probably do this some more to have more variety of models, but we won't be in the model business. That Croquis Cafe does that better than most. So you see, I'm changing the tilt to the eyebrow a little bit, raise up that left one ever so slightly. So with a long pose like this, I can get into some deep anecdotes of what we're doing and our models, etc. and so on. They were all very professional, classy, really good kids. Oksana here, she's actually from Russia. She was born there, and then she had adoptive parents that came and adopted her. I believe her brother, she said, I'm not sure, but I think she told me, like, way out in central Russia, way far out, kind of isolated. So it's fascinating. She does have very classic sort of, I think, Russian kind of features. So it's great to have her as a model. She does some, I believe, some local fashion modeling too. So she was a pretty natural choice for us to utilize as well as we start this process. But we're excited to have models that are clothed and some that are nude, and we're going to definitely shoot for more ethnic variations. We'd love to have some black models, both male and female. That'll be my next goal, hopefully within the next 6 months or so, to have 2 or 3 lovely young or young at heart models of color, black or just anything that certainly is not Caucasian. We want to make sure we represent a wide variety of body types if we can, and also ethnicities, which I think is important. So you can see I'm getting a little bit firmer with what I'm going through, and I know that I've got a longer pose, so I can slow it down. Feeling my way through the side of the pectoral as it begins to turn and go under the armpit there too as well, where that slight turn down is. The pectoral covers the sternum and then parts of the ribs, and then it comes over and turns around and connects into the humerus, the tubercle of the humerus. And it gives us that armpit look, which is there's a hollow there, which we know is our underarm, right? And then we have our lat under there, and then part of the deltoid will come on top of that as well. So that's what I'm doing now. If you're following along with the drawing, which I highly suggest, or fast forward it to places where you can get to as well. So working slight tricep bulge there at the back, not a huge bulge, but a firm arm nonetheless. For his kind of socially acceptable beauty that our model has here. What's interesting about her, she's in the Army. She's in the Army Reserve, so you think that a lot of times models can be maybe prima donnas, especially very beautiful models can have that. I've known models that can be that way, both when I was in LA and Arizona. And Oksana, what's great about her, she's a great person, really nice kid. She is in the Army as an Army reservist, and I think I heard her say the other day that there's some kind of nuclear fallout sort of public health safety kind of training that she's doing now, which is impressive. So she does some pretty physical stuff, and while she's going to school, it helps her afford tuition. So I salute her and thank her for her service. It's pretty great. What a great kid to do that. Really down to earth, a lot of fun, and you obviously she is a very lovely girl, but she's really down to earth and just a quality person, which is not always the case with attractive, kind of socially beautiful women. So good for her. So we're coming over here. You're going to find later on I'm going to dip into that unitard a little bit to slim her out. I'll leave her a little thick there, and later on I'm going to dig back into that a little bit further. So I'm getting a little bit more defined with the line work here, working the breast form with she's got a breast cup in there. So it's got a little bit of a kind of a triangular look to that. That's covering the anatomy of the breast there a little bit further. Getting the underarm, armpit of that, then working the anatomy of the breast, the right side sits higher under the cup there as it curves around. Getting that shadow, feeling that through a little bit more. And coming across with the initial tone. You're going to see me in this drawing I'll use, because of the material, the polychromos is very difficult for full rendering. Sometimes I kick myself for doing that, but I think it's important for my students and you guys in YouTube land just to start to work with it. I'd probably have better results if I was working on it without the camera. I didn't have to work at a kind of an awkward position. But you'll see me hatch and then cross hatch and go cross contouring with the form, and then you'll see me go full value with a broad stroke. I'll use a little bit of tone and also line work, both collectively, which I like to do. I think that's a good look. It kind of, again, it connects back to art history as well, where you're using tone and you're also using line, so value and line that work together, and you'll see that it works pretty well. I do like using chalk and I do like using charcoal better than color pencil or wax pencil to polychromos. I think out of all the wax pencils, the polychromos is probably the best to use. I like it better than the Prismacolor. So again, just feeling my way throughout these forms, taking my time, working to the split. This is the actual center now of the chest and the sternum area where the breast separate there, where the unitard comes through kind of elegantly. Kind of a cupping, supporting form, and then we get underneath. Oops, excuse me. Coming through the rib cage and over. Just feeling the barrel-like quality of the side of the abdomen, the lat area, and the oblique. And sometimes I'll look and I'll make a few changes as I'll go back. You'll see me jump around a little bit to make sure I've got things where I want them. Here I'm thinking about the sockets of the eyes and just a general location of where the pupil and iris is, but nothing definitive. See how it's just still blurry? I'm feeling that socket through a little bit. So when I step back a little bit, you won't see me in the camera. I'm looking at it holistically, or the whole thing. And so after I look at it holistically, I'll take a look at the whole thing. I'll take a look at the entire pose and see what I can change. And sometimes when I step back, I'll look at certain area and it's kind of bothering me a little bit, and I'll make a change or two when I need to a little bit. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. Now I'm going to slim the buttocks out just a little bit. It's stuck out a little because of the pose, because of the left leg. And you notice the position of the bottom foot is coming away from us back to the corner, kind of almost the corner of the platform. So it's got an unusual position, which gives the butt pushes out, and then there's more slight strain on the rectus femoris and the side of the leg and the front of the leg, vastus lateralis, and then the bottom calf. You can see where it starts to separate, and you can see the anatomy is there coming underneath the bottom hamstring, if you will. So adjusting that hamstring and then coming back. A lot of times I'll have to adjust the image that I have a little bit. So it'll be a little bit, time to time I'll cut and just redo the audio a little, if you see that. So now coming down to the lower leg where we have the patella region, and we have the tendons of the rectus femoris leg right in through here coming through. And then we have the rectus femoris there and the vastus lateralis of the side part of the leg. And then you can see where she's got her hand on her far leg there. So we want to make sure we get that. And I'm just cleaning up for me right now that part of the leg. And then the closer leg, and coming down where the buttocks ends, the glute ends, goes to the femur, and then over to the, again, the biceps femoris, or the hamstring, if you will. And through there, and then coming on down to the tendon of that muscle, and it's going to come over and attach down to the tibia fibia on the fibia side a little bit. We'll get this, basically the silhouette of that leg. Don't get too fancy here. Got a good shape going, good athletic leg pose. And getting the back part of the turn where the extra space in there can tilt for the femur. We get down now to the calf, getting that egg form shape. Just cleaning out now the drawing, taking it from the gesture to a more tight and volumetric, sort of light, unrefined, if you will, contour line, and getting to the calf and adding a little bit of the bulk of the soleus underneath there. I'll adjust my image a little bit, and I'll just leave that to keep cutting. So sometimes if you see the mouse, I'm just kind of moving the image around a little bit so I can see it a little bit better. Yeah, that's one thing we should talk about too. You don't really get that with the live when you're working live. You can't pull the model into you close. Otherwise, you'd get too close. You almost be on top of the model, which is kind of a no-no. So I'm going to leave the image relatively, this one like it is, to the left with our model, so we don't keep pulling in and out. But ultimately, you can do that if you need, and that's what's different. About working digitally, you can actually take your image a little bit too. So what we see here is we see the patella region here, and that little outside bulge is not the right leg, it's the back leg a little bit, or on the left side of the image. So it's a little bit of her other patella showing through. They're almost connected. And I bring it out a little bit more as to make a connection is to this leg going down in tilt. And I think that it helps a little bit further. And then we get, of course, the classic egg form of the calf coming down to the model here. You're just going to feel the shadow shape, which that's not quite halfway over. And I'm just going to lay it over, lay it in the background a little bit, lay it over the hand a little bit, which is not going to hurt that. Could go back and erase that later if we need, and give a little bit of expression to all that's working for us here. We're going to dig this out, get that tendon dug out. Once it's in shadow, it bulks out the side there. Clean that up, feel that egg form around through here. So feeling the mop in of that shadow shape, and I'll block that in, mop that in a moment. So I'm feeling around the calf. And then gonna mop in the shadow shape there, where that calf is. So it bulks it slightly and flex, not completely, but slightly. And coming down to the ankle there, and a little bit thick, and I'll thin that out a little bit later. So I'll make another pass or two. I'm always judging that. Sometimes I'll leave that thick as well. And so the foot is kind of a classic triangular wedge, and it really shows off in this particular view. The foot pose on the other side, on the right side of the image, is a difficult view because you've got the arch, and then you've got the tarsals there, I believe, coming down to the bottom, and then it's flexed, and you've got the real grabbing of the toes as it's kind of the toes grab and hold on to the cloth there. And then we've got the wedge of the foot, and we've got a little bit, just slightly, the knuckle of the big toe, the proximal part of the big toe, and you'll get a little bit of the nail there, and then I'll get the gesture of the other feet coming in. You know, simplicity is better. You know, I started out with a triangular wedge, and just a few gesture lines can give me better structure than somebody might come along and try to kind of flub it up by over rendering it, or not getting it in the wrong places. That can happen. Getting the cast shadow, it's just slightly tilted away but curved, and winds up at the other foot. Again, getting the platform, kind of repositioning the platform a little bit. So it connects from that back knee behind it, then tilts over to the ankle. And clean that out just a little bit. work this slight bulge as the tibialis anterior, I believe, muscle pulls that out off the femur a little bit. It's nestled in between the tibia and fibia, I believe. Not the femur, tibia and fibia. Sorry about that. Getting the soleus down. And then finishing out a little bit of the value, just the block end, the shadow coming down the leg. And catching that on the inside there. The ankle, the lateral malleolus, if you will. It's feeling pretty comfortable what I've got laid in a general sense. Nothing too dramatic in terms of a finish. We'll get down to there. So I'll go make a pass later on in more red, and then make a final pass in black to really clean it out. Looking at the egg form of the palm, upper outer hand. Feeling where that side part of the ulnar bump of the ulna is there, and jumping back down. You'll see sometimes I'll jump back, I'll go for the area, then something will catch my eye, I'm a little bit bothered by it. Ultimately, I'm going to thin out that ankle a little bit further than what it is now. As you get deeper into drawing, you'll see, okay, I didn't like that, or I may change that a little bit. Go back on the arm even. To the elbow joints here, just kind of feeling just the general setup there. Into the forearm, the extensors here. Feeling that bump, feeling that roundness of the egg-like quality. Coming down through, blocking in, mopping in. The shadow tone there, light source coming from the left, slightly above and center. They're not too terribly high, so it's a little higher than the model, but not a lot more. And then feeling the outer boundary of the elbow, or excuse me, the wrist. And the wrist kind of, as it ends, it comes down to the beginning of the cuboid bones, it gets very blocky. As you can see, her wrist starts to become that stronger shadow tone. It's like a little box turning to the right there. Very much so. It's going to be one way, and then turning where the shadow starts, and then moving to the opposite way like a box. You have to begin, that's volumetric thinking without drawing the volumetric figure all the time. Remember the Cambiasso figures that we've studied. If you're not sure about those, if they're in the drawing database there, take a look at those. Those are extremely important to learn and to master as you evolve deeper into the drawing process of going for longer poses. So we'll start to feel the gesture of the more specific parts of the of the hand. And again, I treat it a lot like the face, the head, where we're looking for a more broader stroke kind of idea rather than trying to render out right now every single detail, on the fingers or the nails. So just taking the digits and the rhythm of that very gently, or kind of boxy-like triangular forms, and they slender out as they move down the model's hands. It's a pretty tough drawing. It'd be a tiny, the hands are already complex, but then when you get them smaller, you have to begin to simplify. You don't have the space to really render out minute detail. Especially on the camera or a drawing, you don't want to make it too long. It's already long enough, but you get the idea of broadening this out. And we can get back to it later on. And then working the pinky as it's kind of extended, has a gestural curve to it, and a little bit of the thumb. Just looking more at the gesture of it, the shape, and a little bit of where the shadow falls or lies, if you will. So just to get a feel for that, where that's located in. You can tell I'm slimming out the buttock some, going back and recapturing that position, and then giving some more tone on it. We'll go darker there, and then you can already throw it on top of throw it onto the background tone too as well. Integrate them together. It gives you more, again, a holistic background that the model interacts with together. And feeling a little bit of the curve of the arms a little bit. So when I start to feel confident, I'll go and add a few more of the rhythmic qualities of the background, the folds a little bit, the drapery study with the figure. And then now just about ready, it looks like, for the hopefully the other arm, and maybe the finish of the more lay-in of the leg too as well, the foot and the leg. Coming back down the calf here. Feeling the egg form again, that tube of the egg form. I'm going to get a little bit more definitive down here now. Go a little bit past the gesture. And we're going to hook on this top of the foot. These bones as they come on in front of the leg here, and we'll get that silhouette. It almost seems like it goes almost straight down. It's at a slight angle. It really wants to push down onto the ground, and then the toes and the ball of the feet catch and grab on. Our toes really grab, especially our four smaller toes. The big toe, it points upward, and the four other toes really grab on like little tentacles, if you will, and they grab onto the ground. They're more important than the big toe. I've been told that you can lose the big toe and be okay. If you lose your pinky, you're going to have some balance problems. So your small toe in the very end of that. Getting this foot to come in front of the other, this leg. Got to do that with stronger line, and I'm going to put tone now over the leg, mostly in tone. You get a little light coming through where the calf starts to turn in towards the middle, and so that gives us some light, and it gives dark coarse shadow as we get down further to that. And then filling out a little bit of the top leg here, coming down. So you can see I'll work an area, then I'll kind of stop and look at the other area and come back. And so you can see the figure almost fleshed out in a good place for a good, a good longer pose rendering. A little tighter than I normally like to do, actually. In the material, I don't like as much. I mean, I'm comfortable with it, but color pencils, I think, tougher for these longer term renderings, especially on camera. Just take a little bit longer. You'll notice once you start to get a feel for it how much harder you have to push down to let the wax pencil really grab onto the paper. The pigment with charcoal later on will be almost effortless. Just kind of a nice feeling. Nonetheless, it is a process. So adjusting the foot a little bit. You can tell it's about even, or maybe even slightly the foot to the back a little bit lower than the heel, but just barely, not by a whole lot. And you can tell I make both the calves and that leg probably a little thicker than I wanted, but I'm going to thin those out just a little bit too as well later on as we go through. So you'll see that the next phase as I work through the figure again, I've got to finish the foot here, then the arm. And then I'll take another pass in red, and you could almost say that would have been enough, but I like to add the black to it and really get even more definitive. Clean that up a little bit, just abbreviating for now, but this middle part of the foot, that ball, the middle section, that's got to come over the back section of where that arch is. It's a very, very slight and smooth transition. It's not a hard edge from where that shadow is on the bottom of the foot as it turns to more the light or the top of the foot, where we have the arch. And just getting a feel of the toes coming through as they almost go 90 degrees from the end of the foot as she points her toes down, kind of digs into the ground in the back of that to stabilize her body there. All right, now for that other arm, that space in between there. And when you get to these places where you've got these arms coming through, it's mostly about the shape of them, but she's got enough shadow going that's nice to where you get the little turn of the wrist. You can see where that's torqued, the tendon that gets down to that little place, the back of the heel, and then down to the thumb a little bit. So we've got that going. A little bit more of an angle. We just want to keep this simple. I just think more here about shape than I am about form for now. And then once we get to the rendering, we'll add a little bit of that. And since it's such a small area, we'll keep it very simple. and also for the time. I think some of the mistakes that less experienced artists can get into is try to render out detail in areas where you don't need as much. You want the most amount of detail here in the time that we're going to have in the face and the head, the focal point, and then we can simplify some of these areas or hands. Now, if we're doing a hand study, then you'll want to put, if it's a big hand on a page or two or whatever, you'll put quite a bit of attention into that nail and whatever. But here we want to keep it relatively broad and relatively more simple. So just tightening up a nice bulge in before the rib cage bulges out, and a nice flat tummy as she comes in there. And so we can get that and then get the feeling of that. So start to feel the wrist a little bit and through here, just kind of getting a sense of, sometimes when I slow down, I'm looking about the width and thickness of where that the knuckle of the thumb, the back part of that, will start down to the actual thumb. The proximal and the medial. The thumb only has two bones there instead of three. Same with the big toe. It has a proximal and a medial. But our hands are a lot more flexible. Now with this, I'm going to put the thumb, ultimately I'm going to put it slightly behind the leg. Now her hand is a little higher up in my in the image rather than the drawing. And I can see that the tilt is a little, I'm going to take that bulge out in a minute of her forearm. It wasn't quite that bulky, but she has a little bit tilted back inward. I straighten that a little bit, but it's not a big deal. It's very minor. And so what I do here is just put the thumb. All right, so now we're moving on here a little bit and ready to begin to sort of get tighter with our block-in or get fuller with our block-in, meaning that we're going to go deeper with our value system. And we're going to start getting more fully into now value and block-in. Sorry about some of the blurriness in there a little bit. Camera, again, sometimes it's hard to read one from the other, so we're just going to have to deal with it. You can kind of see that. You can enjoy the knots on my beanie. I got that beanie, that cap in Venezuela back in, gosh, it was 1990. Oh, I think it was 99, 97, 98, something like that. It's been a while. And I was in the mountains in Merida, Venezuela, beautiful mountainous city. And there was bike riding from the top of one of the mountains out there in the northern Andes. And it's an 8-hour journey from the very top to the area back down to where we rented the bikes. And they take you up there all day. Or it takes about a 2 hours ride to come up there. And then I remember they let us out at a nice little inn, and we had some Venezuelan liqueur, canela, and then we made our way down 8 hours down to the base of the city. It was lovely. So anyway, sorry about some of the blurriness in there a little bit. You can kind of catch it back, and camera has a hard time sometimes reading. I generally don't have to get in this position too often, but it is what it is in there. So I'm just kind of basing out the nose in here. It's kind of just the overall shadow. I'm not worrying about the nostrils, and just getting a little bit more of the overall darker tone, and going to tone down the head a little further and in through here, and feel the brow coming through. Just going to block in some of that shadow tone. You can kind of see it there. The camera cooperates a little bit further. I'm still not worrying about detail yet. I'm going to make another pass at this later on with the darker pencil and really get more sophisticated. You'll find I'll get pretty close to the likeness at the finish there. And so we go from very general to specific. And it'll take about, once I get to that stage, about another hour. I'll show you how I think about at this scale of going from very, very small scale. Now you can really work at type, but that's going to take even longer. I try to get, my philosophy in these videos is to be as quick as I can and give you as much information as I can without being extraneous, and it takes sometimes an awful lot, to do that. So I think that's important to kind of know where I'm coming from in terms of philosophic kind of approach to giving you this instruction. So you can see there's a decent likeness going on, but there's no major detail going on through there. So I think that's important. Working underneath the chin, jaw, sternocleidomastoid into the throat region, picking that apart, or blocking in more value. So the point is to get darker. Start to hit some of this background tone as well. Pushing down pretty good and where I can see good contour line value usage. We're combining, my approach to teaching is, trying to get students to really combine the craft of value and line, contour line with value, with also cross contouring and hatching and sometimes cross hatching, to get a sense of a full use of mark making tools, to get the truer sense of the drawing or the sketch of the form, rather than kind of smudging and blending and trying to get it airbrushed and smooth. Again, I say this a lot, you'll hear this if you've been using these videos quite a bit, is we're making drawings, we're not making smoothed out kind of hyper real sort of photo looking drawings. I think that's not as hard as you might think it is. The more difficult cognitive approach, I think, is to work as they are drawings. Let the photographers do the photography. So just blocking in that shadow shape under on the right side of the head. Pretty good, hollow there where the hair is. Also on the right eye later on. And she's pretty much a good deal in shadow. So at this distance, there's not a lot of detail in those eyes to really look at, unless you bump up the image for the eyes, if you will. Meaning you take the photograph and enlarge it. And I think that's a strength and also kind of a weakness. That's what makes it different from, if Oksana was posing live, we had a class, they're not going to get up and move, 6 inches away from her eyes. That's just not going to happen for social etiquette reasons. But we could do that with imagery where we can, especially high def. These are pretty high def, but we won't do that. I think it confuses. I think it can confuse students. By and large, when you can, if you can work from the live model for a good while, and then when you can, or when it's not, your ideas don't dictate that, or for whatever reason, you go back to imagery if you need that. So I'm a full component of the artist needs to get exactly what he or she needs, he needs for what they need. But if you can train as much as you can in front of the live model, I think it helps tremendously to think three-dimensionally. It's harder, no doubt, but it's certainly the benefit is important. So, again, you can tell that's fleshed out further now. I'm blocking in my values, taking my time. I'm working with generally some of the folds in the background. I'm just worried about more there where their placement is and a little bit of their immediate value, rather than trying to get every detail down. I talk about drawing, working from general to specific. And I kind of also liken it to a treadmill. If you like to run on a treadmill, which I do, especially in the winter months. And it's like just you go over the same tread, right, over and over. Well, it's like you're drawing. You give a whole pass from top to bottom, and then you go over it again, top to bottom. And every time that you go over it and further, it's you get farther, right? You get more distance. Same thing with the drawing. You get deeper and deeper into the drawing. So we've got the nice coarse shadow on the shoulder. So let's review what I'm doing now. So what I'm looking at now here is looking for specifically where the shadows start and the light ends. And you can see where it's banded across her shoulder there and her arm down to her elbow. See that soft banding, that darker? That's not a stripe. It looks kind of like a stripe. It's a soft coarse shadow. And we want that core shadow to be darker than the other shadow to give us reflected light. And then, of course, on the lighter side, it lightens up. And both those transitions are very soft and gradual because it's form shadow, and that's going to give us that beautiful quality of gradual shadowing and turning of the form from left to right and give us that core shadow. Leonardo used it quite well. In many of his earlier paintings, that soft kind of quality. And if you like comic books or graphic novels or some kind of aggressive animation, they simplify the shadow patterns to a shape and they don't add coarse shadow, so they have a dark kind of edgy quality to them. And so they're two kind of big sort of classic schools of thinking about the Leonardo soft sfumato, if you will, the atmospheric turning of the form, and then you get the graphic novel approach where you get the angular shadows, but they're really flat and dark, right? So you get that too as well. I think that's pretty key. So now getting you can see I don't get into tons of it as I kind of just work it down, but now I'm blocking in more of the torso, breast area, torso area. And pulling that neck muscle in front of the back of the trapezius behind her, the shoulder there. Clearing out that line work. Just curving around the clavicle. Get a little bit of the clavicle. We don't see it on the other side much because of the perspective. Yes, we see the same thing on the breast form a little bit. You see that sort of classic sort of U shape or C, like backward C curve, where it's a little darker on the cup there. And then behind that, you can see a little reflected light right in through there underneath the unitard there. Now I'm going to slim her down a little bit. I'm going to push, there we go. See, I can make that tighten. It's a little bit more of a negative space than, it's almost the same actually. It's pretty close there, but it gives her a little bit of tightening in that corset sort of region that makes her nice and kind of thinned out there. Working the core shadow there, that darkest part of the shadow, kind of where the breast ends, because she's lit, chest is lit from the left. And you can gently start to see in the top part of the pectoral where the breast ends some slightly sort of beigey kind of value in her skin tone. And a little bit of light there, where it's not quite as bright where the light's hitting it. And then we'll tighten this line on the outer edge of the breast form. Right in through where the breast ends, and then we have the arm coming down. We'll go gradual. Take off a little bit of that arm muscle. The forearm, not quite as bulky. I'll probably slender it out a little bit later too. It's still a little bit bulky, but you can see where the core shadow is there. I'll go a little bit darker. I don't want to go full dark yet. Meaning that I don't want to completely go dark, because that's what the black is for. I'll set that up. Now I could do the whole drawing in black if I wanted, but I kind of like to add the color variation. It gives it kind of a nice little kick or tone to it. Grabbing the kind of the fold down there, using that nice, later on, that shadow shape right through there to give the arm a little bit more light on it. Same thing here. You can see I can start to really illuminate the model, the light on the model, by going darker now in the background. We've called that the Oreo cookie effect, where we have dark against light, dark against light. Works quite nicely. Meaning that the background could be the darker, and then we go to the light of the chest, and then the shadow on the chest on the right side under the arm area can give us again, that Oreo cookie effect. Dark against light, against dark, against light. Kind of generalize all that patterning. It's not as important as the model. And I'll make that kind of stroking pattern to reflect contouring, cross contouring, to give the drawing form movement, and to give a sense of rhythm in turn, and also rhythm in the drawing too as well. This little kind of, I started developing that mark making strategy when doing these videos, actually, because of camera, where I had to change less my body and more of the hand. That's where that started to develop, ironically. All right, continuing on. So, kind of working, back down the figure. It's becoming more solidly three-dimensional and more lit now. Working the abdomen oblique area. You know, another thing about detailing, you see the stretching of the fabric and material from the chest to the oblique. There's no need to get all that yet if you want to. I don't even get to it at all in the drawing. I omit it. Again, I omit the straps from the unitard as well. I think they look better without. It's a better drawing without it. Obviously, they're structurally needed to hold up and support the clothing, but it doesn't mean you have to include that. Working underneath the chest, just taking my time, taking it slow. Down through the leotard or unitard. Add some more coarse shadow here to that. Adding that banding gives us the core shadow there. Separating the arm now from the unitard there a little further. All right, so I jumped ahead some just to save us a little time. You didn't miss that much. Just getting a little further along. It's the same kind of procedure where I'm just slowly, you can see there now I flip to it, slowly blocking in. So nothing really changes. It just got deeper with the value usage and clarity. So tightening up edges along the arm and the legs and the background, getting deeper. So I thought there's no sense in burning that much time. We can save a little time here. I'll do that a couple of more times too as well. You can see where blocking that value in, adding more coarse shadow, and giving the figure a more volumetric, basic kind of tone. And you can still go darker with the red, and I'll make another pass at the head before I go to the black. So we'll jump there a little bit in a moment here. Okay, you can see me jump ahead even further to get a little bit of clarity and save a little more time. You can see now with the lower leg, I go in a little bit deeper. We'll continue on this journey with the black polychromos pencil in a little bit, but you can see where it starts to really begin to tighten up now. And there's still many layers beyond that, but we can get a more three-dimensional look now as we're taking our kind of intermediate, if you will, kind of section of the drawing as we go further to give us that really strong three-dimensional look. Pulling apart now and delineating stronger the line work there. Slow process of rendering it out. The color pencil can be quite slow. Making a turn three-dimensionally to get that foot and leg to turn. So spaces where I jumped ahead some to save a little bit of time. All you have to do is just stop the camera and render as close as you can to what I have. The part of the great thing about these instructional videos is you can stop them and work, and then play them back to catch up, etc., and mimic what's going on. Ultimately, you'll get to the point where you can do it and do your own thing. So now I'm at the point where I'll grab a little bit of the black pencil, and I'm going to slender that calf and ankle up a little bit. Get it closer to probably the other calf too. I know will at some point, just to tighten and slender them up a little bit, because I'm going to work in the final pass will be in black. The finished will be black with some red underneath, and that'll be a nice look, I think. And so I can slender this out, and I'll start from about back behind the knee here to where that tendon comes across. Grab that leg and just take a little off that bulk of that calf. All the little bit will make a difference here, right, and then down the gastrocnemius, and then the lower on the right there will be the soleus. Take just a little bit off. Right in through there. There we go. Just to slim that out a little bit, just a touch further. And a little bit there. Notice I didn't erase, I didn't fuss with it. Just take things off, and the more you draw over it, you'll correct those mistakes. Work that tendon of the biceps femoris in there a little bit. Slender this down further. And that's the front of the foot now I'm drawing on to the side there. Get a little value across that. Slender that down a little further. Hit that Achilles tendon coming down to the calcaneus or back of the leg there. Let's see if I remember. I slender this down a little bit. And grab the back of the leg where that little crease is so our joint can bend there. I take a little, just a touch, not a whole lot. Probably should take a little bit more. And you notice the back leg, the bent foot, most of that's silhouetted because it's in shadow. It's pretty flat to draw. Okay, now let's go to the head. All right, now it says I move on to the head region. I'm going to spend more time rendering out some of the values and sharpening up. Now I make the head a little bit bigger on purpose. I wanted to stand out and give a little bit more attention to focal points so we can see the features a little bit because the head's generally small here because of the larger study. Just to pull that out just a touch. And so it's just slightly larger, but you're gonna see me work the head, make some changes, and then I'll go over the body one more time, render out a little bit further, and then I'll finish up with more black pencil on the head and chest area, and then I'll let you finish out the study on your own. Just for time's sake, I think that'll be probably the best way to do this too as well. So here I am working the head. What I'm thinking here is, beginning to get a real solid handle on the values, the light and dark relationships, and starting to work the edges and clear out some of the edge quality, meaning tightening the edges and making the image clear, but over amount of time, especially with a slightly longer term pose here. Now I'm burying the the head now in shadow on the right side. And the light source here on the left, and working that through. It takes a lot longer with the wax pencil or the color pencil, quite frankly. And that's why I don't do that often, but I think it's good for students to see that. And you should use color pencil if you feel passionate about it. But we use a lot of charcoal in my courses here at the university, and in other materials, ink and graphite and color pencil. But again, color pencil is a great way to introduce yourself to the figure, and then when you get more confident, I would move to somewhat softer materials so you can render a little bit quicker and not have to dig down in terms of pressure. So you notice now the whole side of her, right side of her head, if you look at the image and then you look at the drawing, there's a long way to go, but what I'm doing here is thinking about the head as more of an ovoid, rounded kind of block, and really where the light ends on her to the model is really from about the center of the head, and everything on the right side is more in shadow, all the way down from the forehead down to the tip of the nose, down to the lip, and to the chin. And we're going to find some parts of the video, just the camera goes blurry in the head, so I apologize for that. The camera can be a little unruly. I have to keep it flat for now. I don't have a 45-degree tripod or apparatus yet, so it makes it a little bit hard. So these drawings that I'm doing are flat on the table surface that I'm working on. When you're working on your own, I highly suggest you work at a 45-degree angle or on a wall or an easel if you can, rather than flat. But I have to stretch. Here I'm standing and stretching to keep my big old head out of there. So I think I've said that before. So here, smoothing over the head, running through, working the features. I'm going to check now the eyebrows here. One's just slightly above the other. And I think I rearrange these a little bit later on to bring it up even a little bit higher and make sure that it works. Or if I haven't, I will later on. But I want to keep everything broad until I get down to an area of the drawing that is when I'm ready to get detail into the work. And so I'm not there yet. So I keep it pretty broad. I'm not using, if you look at my pencil tip, it's not particularly sharp. And I want it that way. I want to keep it more on the side and more broad. And so I don't get into tight or heavy line work yet, because she's very tonal. And I have and we're working a tonal drawing, and we don't have a lot of space. That head in the drawing is only a couple of inches high, if that. And so you have to work. I think you should work, at least in this drawing, very broadly, and then we can start to get some detail. Now I'm working on the tip of the nose there. Eyebrow, again, I'll go back and double check there. It's not uncommon to move it kind of around a little bit. So I wind up with a pretty accurate, view of the model. But I'm always tweaking any kind of portraiture. But you should give yourself a little leeway when you look at major artists. We'll take Van Gogh or Picasso or Rembrandt. There's different interpretations of the same image over a number of years. They all vary a little bit, but they're all relatively in the close ballpark, and that's what we want. If we're drawing this model and it turns out looking like a man, we're far off. And that doesn't happen here. So getting the nostrils of the nose, I'm going to bury it in shadow for now, and then later on I'll come back and I will render out in light and erase a little bit. And that's another thing about colored pencils, a little harder to be additive subtractive, because in certain areas you want that. But I simplify the nose into triangular shape, and then we'll come back later on and we'll really pick apart the bulb, the tip of the nose, that front septal area cartilage, and then the nostrils are, because we're up, camera slightly below her, the nostrils are open there. She has her head slightly tilted, so they're becoming more oval and a little bit more open. You know, one thing too, you want to be careful. Some of the values, I notice students get too dark too quick. Notice we ease into that. It's far less dark inside the nostrils than you think they are. You don't want it to be absolute dark. It looks too flat. There's atmosphere. It's dark in there. If you were a little tiny, you know, bug or whatever, you'd go in there. And it would still be a little light in there, so you could see the bug, I suppose. But the goofy kind of analogy I'm making is that you want to keep your darks in your shadows, not completely absolute dark. Maybe under the armpit there where the line, we get close to that little tissue there under the armpit. Some of the lines around the back of the hand. Both hands as they touch the legs, where they touch gets kind of a really dark line, but for the most part we want to be a little careful with that and ease into that. So you can see it's coming along, and I glaze right over the eye. You don't want to get into eye detail first. You want to get the shadow tones, value tones in there, and then you can pick apart the detail within the eye. So I'm going to move that eye down a little bit later to give a little bit more of a tilt. She's not quite straight there. She's slightly tilted, and I find that students have difficulty with those subtleties. And we all do. You know, I tell my students the natural human tendency is to straighten or to flatten horizontally or straighten vertically. And that's why I love to practice gesture with my students and have very dynamic poses so they start to see the rhythm and movement and really play around with and notice horizontal and vertical changes, and then they can see it in the subtleties. It's a rarity that we get the human figure straight up and down. You know, just our anatomy, our bones are not straight. They're torqued and twisted as well as muscle forms. So underneath the jaw there's the jaw shadow, and then there's a little reflected light underneath there. Sometimes I'll group it all together for a while. Sometimes I'll leave a little bit separate and then go back either additively or subtractively and get the rest of it in. Now we're going to coat the rest of the tone of the head there. Bury that in shadow so we can just tease apart some of the cheekbones on both sides. Again, she's lit from the left and she's slightly above where the strength of the light is. You can see that with her cheekbone on the left side of the face there, and where it's a little bit darker by the nose and it's a little bit lighter under the jaw. So picking apart where the shadow is in the face. Now the hair, where the split of the brunetti blonde, kind of sandy blonde, I suppose, splits apart there with the shadow. Now look at that triangular shape and coating the jaw. And again, notice how blunt the pencil is. It's not very sharp for now. Later on we'll get back to sharpening and tightening. And I can leave the drawing in red, but I'm going to go back and work the head to about the mid-chest in some of the background in the color pencil, so that you see that. And then we'll leave off for the drawing. You can finish the rest out as you need. And a lot of times artists will do that with studies. We'll especially contemporary 20th, 21st century, unless you want to render out the whole figure, which is fine. Finding the nodes of the mouth where the top lip ends and goes into a crevasse where the bottom lip emerges from the top lip and overlaps the bottom lip. So you get those. Those are good places to anchor this tiny head study. Notice how, again, they're on a slight diagonal. maybe 5 to 10 degrees of tilt to the right, pushing the left up a little bit. Cheekbone coming out a little. I think if anything, I probably could have tilted her a little bit more, but it's got enough subtle tilt. So I'm going to glaze over the light side of the face because she's not in light there. There's really nothing in this image except maybe a glistening highlight on her left, in the image, the left eye. That's maybe as light as you can get that highlight. Otherwise, everything else, highlights on the skin tones, which is kind of bronzed, and the unitard, and maybe some of the fingernails, but really not as important. And with highlights, you want to give a hierarchy of which is the dominant one or two, and they're generally going to be close to the focal point for the most part. And then coming around, sculpting, drawing out the lower right jaw, smoothing that out. Working some of the lip and through the bottom lip. Now making that not only more narrow later, so I've got it a little big, I'll go back and narrow that later and tighten it up, get it closer to. You want to be careful there. You don't want to make the teeth too dark in the darks and too light in the lights. They're really, really buried in the shadow there. She's got a very upturned approach. She's got really nice lip form. We have the separation of the top lip of the three. You have the center form, which is really pronounced in the middle, and you have the two sausage-like sides of the lip that really feminine. They're really very feminine. They dive down very quickly on the left and right, and then you have a very strong cleft split in the lower lip, which gives you that strong split of the bottom too. You can see that on more model type that do more than just figure model, which she does. You can see that as well. Getting in between, flat area between the lower lip and the chin. Picking apart the eye. Kind of make some kind of attempts there at eyeball, feeling the structure, and working the shadow underneath the socket, all tonal. These little head studies can be really challenging, especially when you're working that small, because you don't want to get them too detailed or too tight and be out of character with everything else. But yet it still has to be the focal point. And so I stayed away from real hard contour line and rather engaged in more tonal approach there. And so I'll go back and correct and really bring out the head further. The mouth, I'll make the mouth a little smaller and pooch up the upper lip and clean up those teeth a little bit further and make that not so pronounced there. And feeling the chin protruding, nice chin there. And getting a feel for the hair. Let's talk about the hair for a moment. I get a lot of some comments about the hair from YouTube land and from my students. It's tonal. Tone, broad tone over individual hair streaks. We don't have the optical patience to draw every single strand of hair, nor do you want to. So we break it down into values. So when you look at her hair, she's kind of sandy blonde, but here it's all in shadow, right? And so we've got those darker shadow shapes, And then we've got about a step or two up in value of the lighter parts of her hair, and then a few in highlight, but not a whole lot. So if you take that hair in about 3 steps, you'll be fine. What we don't want to do is scratch around and try to draw every single strand. It won't look great. It won't be consistent, and it will frustrate you because you'll have spent a great deal of time as well. So. Again, using the triangle, sometimes I'll keep the triangle around to put it under my hand, and then other times I'll forget. You can get away with that a lot with colored pencil. It's pretty forgiving. You get smudges and stains in your hand. That's actually fireplace soot on my hand there. This morning we had a fire. A little bit of the digastric area underneath the chin and the jaw, down to the trachea or the Adam's apple windpipe, which women are very unpronounced, unlike men, have much stronger, most men, Adam's apple type neck. Larynx, trachea area. And in this image, you can see both the left and right sternocleidomastoid muscles coming down where I'm drawing now, and on the other side where it comes down, that little triangular shadow where they both attach to the sternum. And then on the left one, you can see on the left side of the shadow, as it ends, there's another one that comes down. It's a double strand there. They attach on that sternum quite beautifully, and they give that neck purpose. These come out because she's slender enough to see that, and also she's twisting her head against, slightly against that muscle. That muscle comes all the way behind the ear and slinks down beautifully on all of us to the sternum. So I skipped around a little bit, or I skipped past a little bit to expedite things a little. And so I finished out at the second pass of the head. I've got quite a few passes to go on that to really tighten it up, and working down the figure some now. Again, remember, I'm going to leave the straps off. I think it's kind of nice without them, actually. A little bit more natural. Working through further. Getting further down on the arm, hitting the core shadow. Just takes a while to build these up. Notice that I work from light pressure to build that up to darker. I don't, you push down further and further, but if you go too dark too quick, you're going to get in trouble more. And you can see the light starting to illuminate more on the model. Oftentimes as you're drawing, you can see me pull away from the camera, is allow yourself to step back, look, relate things together, and then come on back. So you can see it all together, really pushing underneath the arm, the pectoral there as it comes up to attach. That's a beautiful area where you have 3 muscle groups. You have the pectoral coming underneath the deltoid, and then ultimately you have the bicep coming out. Together they all emerge in that beautiful, lovely kind of armpit, the end of the pectoral, which for the female goes down to the more pronounced female breast. And working the core shadow in through here. pretty generally, and you can smooth that out later. We do because it's a little bit longer pose. We jumped ahead a little bit to show you a little bit more development into here. Nothing major happened, just working the image. I think it's good to to see every single thing, and you can catch up in your own drawing if you're following cleanly along. I love, one thing, the advantage we have now, technology from when I was a student in LA back in the early and mid 90s, is we have video technology, and so it wasn't until later that I could follow along with some of my favorite professors. I studied with Glenn Vilppu a little bit when I was at Art Center, Harry Carmian, and Steve Houston, and of course they have material out, and I've already mastered drawing fairly well. We all still have levels. Don't think that I'm not finished. I love experimenting, but I like to sit and watch them just for watching, and I'll sit for hours and watch drawing. You could say I'm a drawing nerd, drawing and painting, but it helps me when I'm teaching mostly, but also little tidbits and little things that they do and talk about. Really, it helps as we share along our careers. Our careers are competitive, but they're spirited, and that's great, and they're also very, very, can be very sharing. That's what was my experience at both Art Center when I was a undergraduate and also a graduate student at Arizona State, is that we're very competitive, both getting in and then getting through, but also very, very rich and giving for the most part. Especially in undergrad, it was cutthroat competitive, but also the balance of that, everybody was really giving of one another's time and their insight, and for the most part the same with grad school, even though it was a little bit more cliquish there, but that's part of it. So anyway, the point being is to sit, either draw and follow along or just watch, and there's certain things you can pick up from me or from other artists. It's good, again, to get to many different approaches. So you can see that the drawing really emerging, the light emerging. You could leave it at this level. It's not quite a full contrasted drawing, but it's got enough balance there where it could work as kind of a final finished study. Again, I'm going to go back and render in more of the dark, or finish out the face and some of the chest, so we can really tighten this up. So jump back ahead a little bit, and now I'm going to come back and slender that arm up, and I'm going to hit that core shadow of that arm. You can see that that soft banded area. Darken that in to hit that core shadow. That gives the right side of the arm a more reflected light quality, so it gives that shimmering sfumato. I slendered her arm out a little bit. I've got the angle a little bit more straight up, not quite at a slight diagonal where she's left. Again, subtleties. If I really thought it was important, I would change it, but it's not important enough to change. So that's one of the things that happens. We have so many now imagery that we work from. It's a little bit demanding on the slight changes that we might miss. Again, if it's minor, don't sweat it. If it's major, then change it, right? If I made her look like a man, then we've got a problem. But we don't in that sense, and you won't either. But if you can live with your small changes, they're fine. Working now the leg and the arm here. Bringing out the hand. Excuse me. Bringing out that thenar region of the thumb area, that rounded area of the condyles of the bone down to the thumb. I'm going to put her thumb behind the front leg. since I have a little bit lower, I'm just going to bury that. Just slightly change there from the image is fine. And I think that works well. And we're going to get the separation coming up over to get the ulnar area, that little bump, we call that the ulnar P. Like a little P shape on your ulna. And then coming over, you can see that condyle of the hand there coming down. And we get the index finger that's going to emerge out from that. And we just want to keep this pretty simple. We don't want to get bogged down in too much detail. Elegant sort of curve from the medial joint area to the distal. Keep that shape. So it's fairly flat at this stage. We don't want to get too involved. I'll put a little shadow there to give it a little form. The shadows are on the right side because she's light is on the left. I'm going to start coming over now, working the buttock in the hand, darkening those areas. I hit the shadow on the hand, kind of an oval shape. Getting shadow under the thumb. Just thinking about each finger is kind of blocky forms. I'm going to group the form shadow and the cast shadow together to simplify that. Just a little bit bigger, so they'll all be in shadow. Form shadow on the fingers, cast shadow on the leg, on the thigh there, and then it goes into more shadow. So that way her hand's going to merge a little bit more 3D than I had it before. Then coming down to get the unitard down to the pelvic region. Locating where I'm at with the drawing in terms of the shadows within the fingers themselves, the space between those fingers. Core shadow on the leg, strengthening, darkening the core shadow. It really gives the leg a powerful turn. And then cross contouring around the leg, lower left to upper right. Just pretty natural for the hand position I'm in. And then broadening that tone and then smoothing out the tone a little bit with the pencil, with the broad part of it. And we'll come up to the buttock a little bit and go for another pass. Strengthening the edge of the unitard across the buttocks. And slender out the buttock a little bit. I'll make that dark a little bit later on, I think. Working in that patella, the end of the patella region, where it ends there, that little kind of crevasse, and then some of the tendon region coming down from the vastus medialis, leg bone there, or the leg muscle, medial side there. Or it could be more rectus femoris, actually.
doesn't matter. And then that joint, the tendon in the joint there, connecting over, definitely from the biceps femoris or the hamstring, coming through. And so you see that knee there, you get a little bit of the other patella knee area coming through on the other leg. And we're going to tighten this up, this line now. Slender her out, that leg a little bit further. And you notice I just kind of scissors my, kind of cross-cutting around, a serrated a kind of approach to drawing and strengthening up that core shadow through there. Rendering it through to give it that three-dimensional pop as it turns across the form. So I jumped ahead. You can see where I've finished out the medial part of the leg, or kind of a medium level finish, and I've finishing out the foot here and the toe region, keeping them still fairly general, but within the ballpark. They're a little bigger than the image. I wanted them just a little bit bigger to anchor her a little and not fade away. It's just an aesthetic. I like to make the hands and the feet a little bit larger than what I'm given and you can see artists go the other way. You can see Parmigianino, you can see Fragonard, Watteau, you see Pontormo will de-emphasize at times the appendages, the hands, and make them really, really feminine, very, very, almost too tiny, in my opinion. But it worked to their advantage, so who am I to argue? Certainly with that. So now I've jumped up to the head region. I'm going to make another final pass. And so this is going to get a little choppy in terms of the camera. I apologize for some of the blurring. So I'll show you some, and then I'll cut it out and show you some more to keep it. Won't be quite so irritating. And I certainly apologize for some of the camera blurring. But now the goal here is to begin to really tighten this up, get the best likeness I can get, and to get more clarity with the image and really make it a focal point and show off the light and value here. So we'll pull in a little closer here. You can see that a little bit better. First, I'm cleaning up and getting a stronger edge. So I went for some of the width of the head to try to find the sides of the cheekbones, the jaw there. Jawbone, and now the shoulder deltoid, which I'll probably slender out. It's a little bit wide. So we'll come over here and start to find the edge of the jaw and the cheekbone, and being mindful of certainly form and line weight changes. And go back in there and get a little bit larger camera view so you can see some of that, keeping it very general and broad. From this distance, one of the reasons why I didn't enlarge the model here is because, just to relate this idea that if you want to make the drawing look like it's from a distance, what I've noticed is that if you're playing around with the enlarging of the image, can be fine, but problem is it's really abnormal in terms of if we're thinking about drawing as if we were having a live. She would be live. She's not live. She's not dead, certainly, but she's not live here. She's been photographed, and so we want to keep a little bit more of the consistency of how it would be. When my colleague and I shot these, I was probably at least 10 to 12 feet away. And so that's what we're trying to feel that. And that's probably about the normal distance of a student or an artist away from a model, depending, more or less there. And so that's what we want to feel. So I'm not going to give a close-up there. I think that hurts. Now, it doesn't mean you can't later on for certain techniques, especially if you're working digitally, but I do notice that it has a tendency to warp a little bit of the detailing, and sometimes it's over-detailed when maybe it really shouldn't be. But it's a phenomenon rather than a bad thing or a good thing. I'm not a purist on just about in anything in life. I like to experiment, explore around a little bit. So you can see I'm starting to add, that dark and starting to tighten up, and you'll see the eyes and nose emerge in the hair as we go through this. And so I'll tend to pull the camera in a little bit and then take it out a little bit, and I'd be trying to normalize the idea of stepping back from your work, looking at everything more holistically or in total, and then getting back into a more specific area. The more specific you work, the more often you'll need to step back, or will want to step back from your work and be able to see all the parts together, and then go back in. So adding some more coarse shadow, and then managing the jawbone, coming around the lower part of the mandible as it comes around the jaw there. So kind of the same things I've been doing with the head, just now going for that secondary pass. Excuse me. For a lot of people, this is the most fascinating part of the drawing, where you really start getting detailing in, but I think far too often more inexperienced draftsmen and women want to get to this step way too early, and you want to build it up, especially more of kind of an academic type drawing, which this is. You want to keep these in stages and build up to this over time. And so the drawings can look incongruent or don't work because you've detailed out where you could keep it more general and work on the structure before you get here. So now going in for the shadow shape again, kind of that triangular dark that we see there in between parts of the hair. She's got some darker hair and then a lighter highlights. You get a picture of what the true nature of the hair color is by the eyebrows, which will be more sandy brown. Getting the flow of the hair moving out, not trying to get every follicle, but just getting the spirit and the movement of that. And we'll fix that mouth and get the eyes in there and get her settled in just in a little time. Everything comes in time, because there are parts that you want to change. And we'll get some lighter hair highlights here in a little bit. The table's moving a little bit. It's like on a waterbed. You're a boat, drawing on a boat. Just letting the drawing speak for itself. Let you watch here. Take on that. Step back and take a look. Step back and take a look. Sharpen the pencil if you need. And so I've got two different, we're working with a polychromos black pencil, and I've got two One I'm keeping more blunt and one's a little sharper when I need it. And that works pretty well for me. This one's still pretty blunt. So I'm going to let this drawing run for a while without narration, just to get out of your headspace for a moment. So now going deep into the drawing, getting closer in the camera. Again, every now and then it'll get blurry, apologies for that, but you can see how I'm starting to handle some of the space of the drawing as we get closer in there. It's like kind of being over my shoulder. And I want to get the spirit of the likeness. I don't have to get everything completely together. It's just not the point of this particular drawing, but I've got everything located. I'm going to change the mouth a little bit later and alter some of the things. Now I'm going in with the Japanese mono eraser, and I'm going to just start to generally pop in some lighter value just to separate the hair lighter parts, and it brings out the red a little bit and kind of gives it a nice sort of old master slightly sort of kind of quality to it, but it brings out that coloring. And I'm just looking for shadow in light and dark shape, really light and dark shape. Shapes more than broad, or in addition to just broad areas of value. And what I'm looking for is to get those shape separations, and when I get them, it works. It makes it start to look 3D. And then we get the illusion of quite a bit of detail, which is not. It's just a very simple kind of 1 or 2 step approach. And just the erasing gives you some subtle value changes alone doing that as well. Now going back additively, we'll start to work the parts here. So now I'm going to get real serious about tightening into this head. Getting the tip of the nose bulb coming at us. It's a rounded form, almost like a sphere, like a pinball, but not quite. And I'm going to overshadow over some of the highlight areas so I can go back. I don't have to tease around them, and I can just use my eraser later on to bring them out. You have to be careful here because you go too dark in those nostrils, or you get those nostril shapes too circular, and you're going to miss the anatomy of the nose. I've got a whole anatomy section out there for you for free. Use it, all right? And learn more about nose anatomy, what nostrils, their shape are very oblong, kind of like bean shapes when we look at them from the very, like you were directly underneath the nose looking up, so you have to be careful there. Notice I buried her head in shadow where it needs to be, and then I'll go back and tease out the eyebrow and just tease out the eye. When you look at her image on the left and what I'm drawing, you notice that the image on the left of her, there we go, we get a little bit blurry, sorry. You notice that you can barely see much of the eye at all. Just a little symbol. We want kind of a shape of the eye, shadow, and then a little bit of an iris, pupil iris kind of area, just kind of a shadow shape there. So we get into a little blurry there. The camera doesn't know. Do I read the toboggan or the hat, or do I read the face there? So if you like Venezuelan beanies, then you're in luck because you're gonna be looking at that one. I forget. It was a lovely village I was in Merida, coming down the mountain there, and it was a lovely little stand with native indigenous Venezuelans, native South American Indian. I don't know exactly what tribe or what their affiliation was, but they're certainly within the state of Venezuela, but they were lovely. And I thought I've got to buy a toboggan, or I call it a toboggan, or a hat here, and I've had it now for 20 some odd years, and I love it. I love the color, and I love the history of that. And just the fact that I started up the mountain that morning, this was in August, mind you, and we were so far up the mountain that there was snow up there, it was cold, and so we went to the end before we rode down the mountain, had, again, hot coffee liqueur canela, Venezuelan canela, and then we started on our journey down the mountain. And luckily it was down, because it was an 8-hour journey, so it was all gliding down the mountain. I could imagine 8 hours uphill, we would have been, in bad shape, and I was in great shape then. I think I was 28, 29, and I was a competitive 5K runner, so I was probably the thinnest and the most ripped I've ever been. I wish I could get back there at 51, but oh well. Those of you that are young in age, if you're watching this, you understand that probably pretty well. So my wife looks at these young model images, and besides them all being adorable, she says, "Oh, what was it like to be young? Remember when we were young?" So anyway, I digress. Life is good at every stage. It's in some ways, it's being older at this stage is far superior, actually. Okay, back to reality. So we're working with the nose now, and in toning, I got a little core shadow going on the head there, when the nose brow, and now I'm going to fill in the nose and around the eye and find the eyebrow here. And I want to raise that eyebrow up a little higher. I can see the red poking through, but I want to raise it up. It's a little too low. We don't want to get too low there. And so I'm going to bring out the nice quality of the eyebrow. Just raise that, and I'll probably raise the other one just a little bit to keep the tilt. This one's more of an angle, and the other one's a little bit curved. Those are lovely. Both of these are just well formed across the top of the socket cranium, the brow area. Really lovely sculpted across the model's form. So the trick here is to think about a couple of things. Simplifying, think about structure, but draw the value changes. So we know that this is a ball on the tip of the nose. And we know that the overall nose underneath is more of a triangular structure, where you have soft tissue. And so I'm getting that shadow. I got to get the top of the ball a little bit more hard edge so that it separates from the shaft of the nose going up to the in between the eyes there. And then I'll work on that, and I'll hit, once I get the nose where I think I want it and get it slendered out a little bit, I'll start to pop in this eye. And so now I'm thinking about where the position of the pupil iris is, and it's just a disc now to me. And I just want to gently tease it out, barely. She's looking a little bit, off to the, up and to the right, okay? And then I'm gonna just have that little symbol there as we're working her form of the model, and I'm gonna start to tease out a little bit of the eyeball, the white of the eyeball, but it's very, very subtly different than the pupil and iris. All right, so jumped ahead a little bit. You said I wanted to bring up the eye structure, so I just gently erase down, and I'm going to bring up her eyebrow since it's higher now. And so we can make that more congruent to the drawing, so don't be afraid to do that. That's another reason why you want to ease into color pencil gently, so that you are not getting too dark. You don't make change. You can't make changes, so you want to keep that alive until you get it more accurately. I mean, there are all kinds of color pencil techniques. It's really not about a color pencil technique. It's about just drawing mostly. And so there are all kinds of color pencil technicians out there. So I'm slendering out the face just a little bit, raising the cheekbone, and narrowing the face a little bit to get a little bit more accurate. Generally, eyebrow shapes take all kinds of different raised, sort of mountain looking or inverted V shapes, if you would. You're working the nose, make sure I get the ends of the nostrils in the right places that I want. At this stage, at this space, and at this kind of detail, what I should have said earlier is the face begins to, and the head begins to reduce down to symbols. And what I mean by that is simplifications of complex parts of the drawing. Eyeballs, the nose, the mouth. We don't see any ears in this particular case, but we start to reduce their complexity down. Come back and start to tease out a little bit of the line, that space between the brow and the eyeball itself, a little bit lighter there, other pupil in the iris to bring that out. The Japanese mono eraser. Excuse me. Pulled out just a little bit of the form here, or the view here, to see a little bit more of it. And we're starting to bring out that pupil and iris, just that symbol a little bit. And that's still going to be too light. I'll darken it in a little bit, where she's got her looking slightly, not at the camera, but away from us and up a little bit in the corner. starting to soften that cheekbone. Get it closer in the real close in the ballpark of what her likeness is. Excuse me. A little cough. No COVID. I'm fine. At least I think. It's so crazy out there. Everybody can be asymptomatic, but my wife and I have been pretty diligent. Fortunately, I hope you have where you're at. And then 5-10 years from now, this video will age stamp it again. So just teasing out some of the hair, just digging into the shadow shape. I draw less of the light and more of in between in the shadow. It's kind of just the opposite. And she's pretty in deep shadow there with her face. See, I'm glazing over the eye, the eyeball, and the white of the eye, just to pull it back in shadow. She's far less light than you think it is. The highlights are on the bridge of the nose, the eyeball to the left, and then to the cheek on the left. So I'm going to let the video run for a while and not speak. All right, so I'm back narrating a little bit. You can see where I'm going to be jumping ahead here because the camera got blurry. But essentially, I just been doing what we normally been doing here, and rendering the head. I've changed and shrunk the mouth to get it close to what the image is giving us, and just kind of now noodling out the head and cheek and chin region and neck region to get it closer to what I want for the image there. Sorry about some of that blurring, but it was just, it got too blurry to make any sense. I think it would have irritated rather than helped. And there we are, pretty much with where I want the head to be for this study. So I went from a very, very general look, right, to now a very more polished look within the image. And now here we are back to the model full form, and I'm gonna take it now to about mid chest region for a finish, and then bid you adieu, and you can finish it out on your own if you would like. So I'm going to keep on going here, tightening up the head and working on the background. Now you can tell I've got the head a little bigger by design, just a little bit larger to bring out and push that head forward, and we'll bring out focal point 2. So I'm going to continue on here. I'm going to work to about down to the chest, work on the sketch, and I'm going to come back and narrate towards the end. But you know, obviously you'll have the video to watch, and we'll get into some closer up details. And we're getting into that middle to later stages, about another 15 to 20 minutes left in the drawing, and you'll see it go faster. You notice I spent quite a lot of time tightening up on the head, which needed excuse me, for the level of finish that I wanted, the sketch that I wanted. So I'm going to stop narrating and let you draw and or watch and draw, and I'll pick it up about it another 15 minutes or so. I will get close up a little bit further and we'll render out the upper chest, breast area. Working in that shoulder and deltoid. Pushing now, simply just knowing that I want to spend about another, let's see how much longer, about another 4 or 5 minutes left. Just working on kind of finishing the top, quarter of the model, the drawing, render out the focal point, kind of bring it to a conclusion. And so we'll work the unitard top here a little bit, and the breast form on the shadow side a little further. It's a nice rich shadow area across the left side of the background, close to the model's left, or the left side of the breast, and the other image there that we can use to trap the light. And so the darker we go back here, the more the light will illuminate and have a soft, kind of glowing quality to it. And just being careful to bring up the value in the back cloth against the edge of the model's form there. And keep that edge nice and crisp. And I've got a little tight line too, so we can use line. And we can also use edge and value contrast to really bring out the three-dimensional quality of that to work for us. Which is what we're getting there, which helps to illuminate the chest area and start to bring out the light further. Bringing it down to the hand a little bit. The background, I will get to the right side of the chest region. Again, I'm going to leave the straps off the unitard. I think it's kind of elegant without them. Kind of a corset. And again, I'm toning. I'm putting a broad tone down, and then I'm also kind of creating an incisive cutting line to give a cross contouring approach as well, to give that quick, sketchy kind of line toning across to move the eye, and also to give the illusion of form and turning. So we're almost there at the end here. That's kind of a signature thing I like to do with more academic drawings, is sort of quickly combine broad tone and then also stroke and mark making to finalize an image. So we're just about there. So I'm going to leave now this drawing as it is, roughly. And if you've been drawing along, awesome. Keep on going and work the image all the way through to the end. Work your background further and then work those legs further, etc. But I think we've got everything I need for this study. We're at about 3 hours. I think that's really good Good study. You guys take care out there. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.